Public Accounts Committee at SCAP 10, right? I think that's what it is. I would need to point out to you that you will be given evidence under oath, and it is anticipated that you will be as truthful and accurate with your submissions as possible. And I'll also let you know there's a penalty for not so doing. All right, we thank you for accommodating us. You can either affirm that which you will say to us, or you can take a formal oath. The option is yours. The option is yours. Would you like to take the oath or simple affirmation?
Simple affirmation.
Okay. Yeah. You can lose the mask for the time being if you prefer, because you're not in any close proximity to anybody else.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I do solemnly and sincerely affirm and declare that the evidence I shall give before the committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
All right. Thank you very much. Get off your seat. And just for the record, as you sit, state your name and your current position with the Transport Board and how long you've been in service there.
My name is Fabian Wharton, the CEO of the Transport Board, 1 year, 7 days.
How are you finding it?
It is interesting.
Interesting.
Yes.
Challenging.
Very.
Satisfying.
Yes. When you achieve something, you feel really good about it, you know, having made a change.
What do you list in your major achievements in the year you've been there?
I'm happy to see the electric buses arrive.
But you haven't invited us for a ride on one of those.
Well, I'll make sure that happens.
Well, you should.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Wharton. The areas of query would have been indicated to you in the summons which you received. There were 6 or 7 of them having to do much with the processes approved at the Transport Board, the procedures put in place for governing operations so that there are high levels of service afforded to the public by the board, high levels of accountability, and a clear pursuit of the mandate of government in providing the public service of transport for the people of Barbados and our visitors, etc. There's some other issues there relative to concerns raised by the Auditor General in his last special report of the Transport Board having to do with replicated invoices, high frequency of repairs of same vehicles, even a listed missing vehicle, which I'm sure you have no knowledge of, and there's some wrong you will tell us. But we are concerned that we can't find minutes of the meetings of the management of the Transport Board. Ms. Willoughby, who serves under you, would have presented for the information of the board 17 copies of minutes referencing 17 meetings held. Well, there are several other meetings held as we understand that. And that the minutes of those meetings would have been recorded and would have been circulated across departments. But yet, she has not been able to provide us with any more. Can you speak to that matter?
Well, all I can say to that matter is when we received the request, Ms. Willoughby actually sits in the CEO and COO's office. The COO would have been the former marketing manager, and Ms. Willoughby would have been her secretary then under the period. But when we searched the office of my office, where we would expect these things to be held, the only things we found were old board minutes. But we did not find any management minutes. When we queried with the secretary in finance, which would be Ms. Sue's secretary, still couldn't find any physical copy of those minutes. So the minutes that you received would have been those minutes that Ms. Hodder, who's the CEO, and Colleen Willoughby was her secretary then, would have had kept in their possessions, filed in their department. So those are the only minutes that we can find on the Compounded Transport Board that corresponds to the period that you're looking for. I actually physically helped Ms. Willoughby search for those minutes.
Would you care to venture an explanation as to why that situation should obtain?
I really don't know, to be honest.
Does it mystify you?
It was kind of surprising. I expected to find them. When we got the request, it was like, okay, that's a small issue. But trying to locate them was another matter altogether.
What happens to the records of meetings in which you sit? You sit as chair of the management meetings?
That is correct.
And what happens to the record and minutes of those meetings?
Well, those meetings are kept with the current secretary, which is Miss Willoughby, in her office.
Meetings are held with what frequency?
Once a week, every Tuesday.
Every Tuesday. And you've been there for a year.
That is correct.
So you have copies of all of those minutes?
That is correct. But in some instances, let me just clarify, you may not have a meeting on Tuesday because you may miss some.
Yeah.
So it will not fall evenly every single Tuesday.
Any other question from anybody else relative to the matter of missing minutes?
Good afternoon. Nice to meet you again.
Hey, good
I know in most organizations the minutes would have been kept on computer. Was that the case with you all?
Well, they are, from what I saw, the minutes were in hard copy. I have not seen any soft copy, the minutes anywhere. No, there's nothing. I know we keep some now on the share, which is the share drive. I'm a computer person, so I talk loosely. So on the share drive, that is what we do now. But
So that would have been new to you, as far as you know?
That is correct.
Any other question, minutes from anybody? All right, we can move to the other aspect we will want to interview you on. You're the current serving CEO. When you would have arrived at the transport board, what would you have discovered that bothered you, that troubled you, that you saw as challenge or problem that needed to be addressed? What was your assessment of what procedures were in place for critical operations and the extent to which these procedures were being followed? Just give us a general assessment of your findings when you arrive, and perhaps we can ask you after that what has been done since then to bring about some improvement.
What surprised me what was given to me first was the contents of the Auditor General's special report to look at. And I was extremely surprised by its contents in terms of the lack of processes, procedures, the issue of how double invoicing could occur. So I know that the board had, prior to my arrival, hired an internal auditor. And during the year that I have been there, we have done reviews on the quality. We are currently doing the quality assurance, some areas of quality assurance right now. We have done stores, we have done purchasing, we have done, started to fix the asset register to make sure we know where the assets are, where they're located, etc. So it's a case where in some instances there were policies there, but they were dated, you had to review them. And in other cases, the policies weren't followed. On the IT side, the system had some deficiencies, so we had to get upgrades done and patches done to fix some of those deficiencies as well. So that is basically what has been happening over the last year. And we have also, in terms of dealing with parts and how we order parts, we are only taking the dealer recommended parts for the Marco Polo, so that is what we are doing as well. And then we make sure too that we had the process for disposal of assets, for disposing of the buses, clearly documented as it relates to how do you determine when an asset, particularly a bus, is disposable. You compare the cost to repair versus the cost, the benefits that you can get from that bus. So say, for example, if it takes you $200,000 to repair a bus, and the bus is a 97 model bus, then you start to recognize that that doesn't make any sense. So then you would strip the bus, take its parts, let those parts go into the stock inventory, and then go through the boarding process, which would also involve having an independent assessment done by the workshop manager of the Ministry of Transport, Works and Water Resources. And then he applies a value, and then that bus can then be disposed of. And we did disposals recently through a public auction. So those are the kind of areas that we have have tightened on.
What about relationships with agents who supplied services, contracts, and what are your contractual relationships with some of the major partners that the board has dealt with over time? UCAL, Transtech, these kind of guys.
Our relationships right now are UCAL, Geo, Simpson Motors, LNN, mostly.
Who's GEO?
This is another bus repair workshop as well.
Okay.
So these are they are vetted and due diligence is done to ensure that they can deliver it and etc. We make sure that we follow the processes that returns to when a bus comes back from the supplier, etc. So the relationship is one which is where there's policies established. The policies do not deviate from supplier to supplier. The process is a straight process for everyone.
You have a relationship with Transtech? Did you mention Transtech just now?
No, at this point in time, we don't really have a relationship with Trotman.
Is there any specific reason for that?
No, there's none.
Oh, okay. Anybody else? Yes, go ahead, Senator Nurse.
Just one little question. In the Auditor General's report, he had identified a number of instances where the board, the transport board, had been doubly billed for work that was done, and they had actually paid it. He had identified up to the tune of just over $250,000 that was affected in this situation. This is obviously very concerning, and I'm just wondering, since you've been there, what has been done, or can you just enlighten us? What have you done to strengthen this area? Because obviously there is something going wrong. That is, the oversight is obviously not as strong as it should be. So I'm just wondering what you would have put in place, or what the board has put in place to rectify the situation.
Well, I understand your question, and the concern is a genuine one. What could have happened before was that, say, for example, yourself dealt with a supplier and you took the invoice into accounts, for example, and someone signed off on it, then the accountant would assume that everything is okay and then go ahead and pay it. But the correct procedure, really and truly, especially for servicing, is that when the job is complete, that job has to be assessed with the quality assurance department. So these are already checks and balances coming, which would not allow a double invoicing out to occur, because it has to be channeled through the system. So this is what happens first. The quality assurance persons will have to check first that what was done to the bus is what was needed to be done to the bus, and that the bus is actually fixed and working. The invoice, the cost of that repair is entered into the system by the quality assurance clerk. So whereas someone may want to walk and bring an invoice into finance, and then the accounts payable clerk maybe enter it so it can be paid, that it can no longer obtain, because quality assurance persons have to ensure, 1, the job is done, 2, they are signed up for the job, and 3, they are clear into it. Then when that happens, it goes over then into finance through the system or through the computerized system, where they do their checks and balances. So therefore, there's only one invoice coming through the system. Then the approvals are done. Then the payment is made. The payment is not even made yet. Then the payment is recommended for a payment, and then it comes to myself, Ms. Soda, and the acting FC to ensure we verify that everything has been in place. We double check with quality assurance. We do our checks and balances, and then agree to pay. So although some people say it's a long-winded process, we have to do it that way, given what transpired before, to try to make sure that we stop all of these holes and kind of minimize and alleviate all of these issues that can occur with double invoicing. So that is the process that we have in place right now.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question. You raised a point there that was of interest to me in terms of the systems and the checks and balances that you've put in place to ensure that you don't get double invoicing going through the system. Would you know, and you also demonstrate a high level of knowledge on the procedures under your authority, would you happen to know if that Magneto system, are y'all still using?
Yes, we are.
And would you happen to know if the Magneto system allows for the same invoice to go in twice? Or is it, as you seemed to be suggesting when you were speaking, that one came through the system and the other one came by hand through to the financial controller?
Right.
Would you know if the Magneto system had that weakness that invoice could go through, same invoice could go through twice? Or would it have to be the other thing that you shared just now was possible?
From my knowledge, from what I have seen, I can't say definitively if Magneto would allow the same invoice to go through twice, but I know that if it's coming through Magneto, you will pick up if it's the same invoice coming through, for sure. Based on the check and balances are in place.
Okay.
Even if the invoice has a different number, it should be caught somewhere between quality assurance and the CEO and the COO because of the checks and balances that are in there coming through. So even if there was a slip, there's still enough built-in check and balances in the procedures to pick it up very quickly.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mr. Trotman, did you have any questions for Mr.?
If the chair just asked a couple of questions. When we were looking at the report, one of the great challenges that the board faced was having its deficit was a challenge. Has that situation changed?
We're having some difficulty hearing it.
Yeah, we were talking about some of the issues that would have occurred over the period of the audit review. One was bus availability. How has that situation changed? Let's start with that one.
Well, as you were noted, but the government of Barbados had also purchased 33 new electric buses, so that significantly increases the amount of buses available. There was also a project taken on by the government, by the board, which saw 15 additional units being retrofitted. The engines and the transmissions were changed. These gave us tremendous cost savings on brakes, diesel consumption, etc. We're doing another 15 of those. Actually, right now, so in circulation, right now we have about 17 of those retrofitted buses. So what we have done is also look at ways to reduce our costs, especially given the COVID time with the falling revenues. We have gotten more efficient with a lot of operational things that we did in terms of how we utilize our staffing, our security, etc. So the board had managed to reduce its losses, inclusive of the government subsidy, down to $8.3 million in the last financial year. So it is a case where it's a work in progress. We have taken up the new policies that guide everything else, and we have seen significant savings. In addition, what we have also done is place a huge emphasis on physical security, installation of cameras, etc. To ensure there's no revenue leakage in terms of access to diesel or diesel pumps and those kind of things. And so what we are seeing is a gradual decline in the expenses, especially on the bus side, the bus maintenance side too. What has happened is that, take, for example, a normal bus, you change the linings probably every 3 weeks or so. But with the retrofit buses, you're seeing the improved performance and the length of time that you have to take to make those changes. So the cost to maintain the bus significantly decreases.
So if I just want to look at, a couple areas, so you said bus availability has increased. Mm-hmm. So what kind of fleet level do you have now?
The fleet level now is about 33 and in a region of about, today, about 60, 70. But we still have, remember it's fluid. I don't like to say numbers, but it's got to be open as much so you can understand. So we may say 60 today, and it could be 90 say Wednesday, 100. So we're looking somewhere between a fleet of 60 to 100 buses, and that are workable. And then we may have a major defect, major defects of about another 20 buses that would like need a major engine repair or major transmission work, which would take longer. So in addition, the board's model now is not to try to get to 250 buses per se. Remember, the board has the transport augmentation program, which is used to subsidize the fleet size. So therefore, if you have the transport augmentation program, which is TAP, and just for clarity for everyone present, that is a program which uses private minibuses and ZRs or those type vehicles under the transport board's operation and under its schedules. So what you have a fleet of what we call TAP vehicles. That number is now 71. So those vehicles plus the electric vehicles, plus the retrofit vehicles, plus the other vehicles that we have, the best of them, when you put that all in context, you start to get the fleet that you need in order to service the routes that you're looking to do. So it means that trying to keep, what they were trying to do before, they were trying to keep 180 more buses on the road, which the cost was astronomical. So now you cut that in half, basically, you retrofit some of them, that you get the savings from doing that. You bought 33 electric buses and you have TAP. So therefore you have a fleet that's going to cost you less.
So in terms of the ideal fleet, or do you have a number in terms of what you would consider ideal?
Probably about 160, 170.
And what would that be based on? How would you arrive at 160?
That is based on the routes currently and that we would service, as well as the other needs in terms of where we are having some issues with cross-country routing, etc. And but we have done a thorough assessment of that, so that is why you get to that number. So,
and you mentioned in terms of finances that last year that you had a loss of $8.3 million. I say compared to what, so that you have a year before.
I think it's 21. I don't want to give an incorrect number, especially if I was sitting on the oath, but I will tell you the reduction was around $11 million. 11 point something. But I would pass that exact information on to the committee.
Right. The revenues were declining over the years for the transport board. How are they faring compared to previous years now?
But remember too, it is a situation where you have a declining ridership in terms of overall in the market. The market is contracting a bit. Even when the bus fares went up to $350, where people were expecting this huge increase in revenue across the sector, that did not happen because some people opted to walk, some people opted to drive, some people thought it was more financially better for them than to go and get a loan and buy a car. So the actual market shrunk a little. And then with COVID now, the market and the way how the economy is, so the revenues are under pressure. And that is why we are spending so much time on the expense side, because we know the revenues is under severe pressure.
What about competition from the private sector? How is that impacting on you?
In terms of?
Well, in some instances, you have transport board and private sector buses on the road. Transport board, I assume, would have a schedule. They don't have schedules. Mm-hmm. So how does that play out?
It is a difficult situation to deal with, especially when it's the same identical route. You are correct. Because there's no secret that the private operator will wait. You know that the bus is going to come out at 11:30 or 12 o'clock, and they would come out at 20 past or 25 past and be 5 minutes ahead of the bus, and then they get all the passengers on the road. So then the board bus will only basically be moving with seniors and the persons who would have boarded the bus in the terminal. So that is one of the challenges we have. Is it going to go away? No, it's not. Well, unless we do a total rationalization of the entire sector. But that is the reality of the situation which we are confronted with.
So in terms of strategic planning, would you have listed all the challenges that you think that you would face and have a kind of program in place to deal with these challenges?
Yes, we have done that already.
So what would be some of the key challenges that you think that you face, and what are some of the suggestions that you want to put in place to deal with these challenges?
Well, as it stands today, we have issues with, we have some issues with the financing, etc. So we have done a lot on that in terms of reorganizing the business and how the business functions. We have also challenges, as you said, with the route, with the competition, with the private vehicles, etc. So we work with our partners to ensure, you know, that we get it right in terms of making sure that certain times of the day where we know that the competition will disappear, we make sure that we have our buses here. So that's the strategic move in terms of getting revenue from that route, which might be perceived as a route that is not a good one. So sometimes you don't try to fight, but you maneuver around the scenario that you're confronted with, right? In terms of the perception of the board and trying to get the public image of the board increased, we have done a lot of work with that. We have done, because we were basically very silent on social media, so we have now done a lot of work in terms of social media, in terms of messaging, using GIS, using the Instagram, the Facebook, etc. That was one of the big areas as well in terms of strategically positioning the organization and getting the messages across. So those are some of just the basic areas.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Trotman. Any queries over here? Any questions over here? Go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity again, Mr. Chairman. It came out of the response you gave me earlier, and I just wanted to clarify a process and get it on record. Based on what you said in terms of the Magneto system and how an invoice proceeds through the system all the way up to the financial controller, going back to the issue that was raised in the Auditor General's report, where you had one invoice being presented twice. In both cases, whether it flows through the Magneto or whether it comes by hand to the financial controller, would every invoice have to start with the quality assurance department?
Or the department to which the service was rendered.
Was rendered?
So if it's, let's say for example, it's an electrical repair to some bulbs or something in the organization, that will not come to quality assurance, that will come through the administration department. So they would have to validate, do the validations, etc., before it even reaches the finance department.
So whoever starts that invoice would have had to verify that a repair had actually happened and that repaired unit, whatever it was in working order before they could sign off and have it presented into your system.
Agreed.
Yes?
That is correct. And also remember, it even starts before the invoice, because before the invoice, you have to have a request for the service, and then you have to have a quotation for that service, and then the service has to be performed, and then you get the invoice.
Just wanted to get it on record.
That is fine.
Thank you.
Do you have, Mr. Wharton, any internal memos or any such documents relative to your attempts to improve operational management issues down there that you can share with the committee?
Yes, we have all the, I can have them forwarded to your office.
Is there a documented strategic plan following on from what Mr. Trotman had asked? Could we see a copy of that as well?
Yes.
Anything else from Mr. Wharton from anybody? Thank you, sir.
That's it.
That's it? For now, anyhow.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.